Welcome to the Association 100 podcast. The A100 podcast is an extension of our Association 100 bi-monthly newsletter that focuses on best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies and tactics that work in the world of associations. The podcast will feature meaningful conversations with association professionals across the country, taking a deeper dive into trending topics, offering insights that both inform and inspire.
Welcome back for our latest episode of the Association 100 podcast. We are broadcasting live from the ASAE conference in Atlanta. I'm your host, Megan Henning. I'm excited to welcome our guest today, Barb Jones, CEO at the Clinical and Laboratory Standards Institute. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. So, as the CEO, you oversee an organization with a 50-year legacy. How have you navigated the challenges of managing such change within this well-established association?
It has been challenging, but what a labor of love, right?
Yes.
There have only been 3 CEOs of the organization in its entire
Wow.
history, 56-year history, and I'm only the third. Very exciting that I'm a woman.
Exciting, yes.
With only 3 in our
Yes.
history. And that's very important to our constituents. We have many women in our constituencies, which is vast. And
Yes.
I heard time and time again when I first took over, so glad they got someone who understands what's going on with me. And so that's wonderful, but it is daunting.
Yes,
Right.
I would think so.
But actually, when I was grateful that you allowed me to think about these questions before I got here. And as I was thinking of that, I was really excited about this question because, to be honest with you, it's been really easy. And I'll tell
That's
you
good.
why. When you have a legacy organization, the mission's built. It's
Right.
strong, it's structured, people know it. And even without being able to articulate it, now I found out that we didn't have people who were really able to articulate our mission, but even still, they knew it in their hearts because the organization had been working towards that. So actually, I found it really easy to connect everybody to the mission. And change management is very difficult. Of course, when
Yes.
someone comes in, it's change, big
Always,
change.
yes.
The CEO before me was fantastic, 17 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of nervousness. What's this weirdo going to be like? And so I started very easy with helping everyone to understand why I valued the mission,
Mhm.
how I saw their jobs fitting into the mission. And then as we grew their jobs and grew what they were doing and changed some things from the past, always pointing it back to the mission.
I think that's great. And not always something associations focus on. And it's such an important aspect
It's
of it.
the biggest
Especially
tool
with
you
yours.
have.
Yes.
It's the biggest tool you have. It's sitting right there. And if you're not utilizing everybody's connection to your mission, you're wasting your greatest tool. That's what I feel.
I think that's great. So I want to switch, topics. I want to talk about artificial intelligence because who isn't talking about this, right? I just recently saw on the news that they think that AI will help with breast cancer screenings, which is remarkable. So how do you see AI impacting the standard setting process in the clinical and laboratory domain?
You're right. We're watching it like kids in a candy shop window in part, but also watching a horror movie. It's one or the other.
So true. Yes.
And we don't quite know how it's going to go, right?
Right.
I have the great honor of having the most brilliant daughter, and she is a data scientist who works in AI and has been for some time.
Wow.
And
So this isn't new to you.
no,
This feels new to me.
no. And so I had her. I've had conversations with her, an expert in AI, to frame my thinking around how does this impact standards development. And CLSI we're a membership organization,
Mhm.
but we're also a publishing company, like many of our colleagues out there.
Yes.
And the publishing industry is, I think, going to be the hardest hit with AI
Yes.
because if I can just take a second to explain AI the way my daughter explained it to me,
Yes.
which I think is really amazing. And it's especially important for standards development or any guidance.
Okay.
So what she explained to me is that you have a computer program, let's say, and you're training it with a whole bunch of data, and it's training 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, more than you could ever do for years and years. It never gets tired. It never has to sleep. And it's just taking in data.
Oh, God.
And
This is the horror part.
no, it does feel a
Yeah.
little bit like that, right?
Yes.
Because we all know that you can look on the internet and find things that aren't true
Yes.
and aren't real.
Very true.
Right. So it's partly the biases that go in the data that goes into it is a bias.
Yes.
But what's really important, and I think is absolutely fascinating, is there's the generative AI tools that you pose a question to them, they get it wrong. You say, no, that's not right. And an example would be, what does an engineer do?
Mhm.
And the AI tool could come back early on and say, an engineer drives trains. And you could say, that's not the kind of engineer I'm talking to.
Yes.
Talking about this is the kind of engineer, let's talk about. And then finally, after going back and forth through programs, you get to a point where the AI tool can say, well, an engineer builds bridges. That's not false.
Right.
Being not false is not
Doesn't
the
make it
same
true.
thing as being true.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that's the challenge with AI, is that this tool is made to be not false, or
That is a very interesting way to put it.
Or to
because
get-
you're right.
to get to an answer that a computer program can't detect as false. And that's why when you find images created with
Mhm.
AI, you'll see somebody with 10 fingers.
Yes.
And you're like, but see, you as a human, you can figure that out, right? You can see
Yes.
that. And you can say, most humans don't have 10 fingers
Yes.
on one hand. That's not only is that false, it's not true, right?
Yes.
So you as a human can do that. And so what my brilliant daughter got me to a point of understanding is you can use these very powerful tools about 80% of the way. And then there's a point at which you need to have humans come in and be a part of the process. And I'm going on, but just in the standards realm, that's particularly important because many of what we capture through the consensus process, that give and take of a standards
yes.
development
Yes.
process, is coming to a determination through experience of one person and different experiences of another person to a best practice. And it happens in the moment.
Yes. Yes.
And it's
And there
not,
can't be a substitute for that.
no, and it's not written down. It's just not written down.
Yes.
The most practiced laboratorians that are determining best practice for a certain blood draw technique have been doing it for years and years
Right.
and years and years, and understand and know from experience and have never written it down. So no AI tool is going to get that.
Right.
However, the hard part of standards, literature reviews, putting things in an
Yes.
outline form, those kinds of things, that's the hard part for humans to get over the activation energy and start doing. Right?
Yes.
Start writing something, start doing this. I think AI can be a tool that we can use. So that's the candy store version.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it more like you're looking in the window of the candy store, and in the background, there's also a horror movie playing. You just
Yes.
have to keep your eye on it,
Yes.
right?
I think you're right. And I think in terms of your members, that 20% that they can only do it.
They're experts.
How are you going to safeguard that from people who would say, we're just going to have this thing write it and we're going to rubber stamp it?
We're one of many standards development organizations and called SDOs. And it's a very, I like to think, special kind of association because the responsibility is very great, especially
Yes.
in our world.
In healthcare and health services, this is a big deal. You can't get this wrong.
No, I got my training at NIST, the National Institute of
Mhm.
Standards and Technology. I finished my doctorate there, and I fell in love with standards at that point and worked and was a part of and saw standards from everything from the way concrete is mixed
Oh, goodness.
to
Yes.
the way you fight fires and on. Everything has a really important standard foundation, right?
Yes.
So the responsibility is there. And SDOs have this huge responsibility to get that right because standards are built on each other.
Mm-hmm.
You revise standards.
Yes.
Okay. And you rarely ever throw a standard out. And so if the foundation isn't good, then it will never be good.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And so huge responsibility. And as we start to look at how we go about ensuring that our members don't come in with things that are written or not false
Yes.
versus true. A lot of standards development organizations are also working with that
Okay.
problem. And ISO, which is
Yes.
also an international standards organization like ours, came out with a statement. They just flat out said, you cannot bring that into these standards at this time.
Yes.
And we're getting ready to put out a statement that just says, let us figure out how to use these the right way, and then we will guide you on that. We want to give you the opportunity to make the hard parts easy.
Yes. There are the challenges, but that there are also opportunities
Yeah.
that come from it, that to not just say we're either all in or we're all out, because those two extremes usually don't work well anyway.
Typical of our organization, we seek the standard, we seek the guidance of experts. I sought the guidance of my daughter, who is an expert in this. And thank God, because I was completely down the path of you absolutely cannot use this for standards development. It's about the consensus process. And she's like a daughter's do. Mom,
Ease you into it.
yeah. Let's talk about how it is useful to you. And as we talked more, I could see that she indeed was right. There's a lot of the hard part that can be taken care of in this way. And then we can get to the good stuff.
I feel the same way. I have a daughter going into the 6th grade, and the answer with AI is no. Like, you cannot touch it. And as an organization, I think, well, we should be able to use some of it. I mean, it can't be, but still somewhat sounds like a robot when you have it write you an article. It's not like you could just then submit it. It doesn't sound right, or it's not in a client's voice or something like that. So I do think that finding a middle ground, and I do think that finding the middle ground will be challenging, and it will vary between industries.
But we're fools.
Yes.
We're fools if we turn our back on it, right? Anyone that's embracing it has got a leg up. So
I think that's great. So let me ask you this question. We both know that associations play a critical role in driving the industry progress and professional development. How do you, in your role, inspire and motivate your team as well as stakeholders to embrace this type of change and stay at the forefront?
you mean the type of change that is, for example, AI or just innovation in general? Right. That is hard. And you know what? I think that most of my colleagues who work in associations would agree that one of the hardest things to do when you have we have a volunteer workforce, people who give of themselves to our association, right? We can't do what we do without our volunteer experts. The CLSI experts are the greatest in the world, and we rely on them. However, we want to bring in younger voices, and as do all of our colleagues, right? It's really important to bring in younger voices, and not young as in young in age, new voices. Yes. People who are into the newest technology, people who have something different to say.
Yes.
But in an organization like ours, where working with CLSI is quite coveted, sometimes it's hard for people to get permission from their workplace to be involved.
Right.
Or we have someone who's been involved for 40 years, 40 of our 56 years.
Wow.
And they don't want to give up their slot.
Right.
These are their friends, and this is their social network, and this is a really important part of their life. That's two challenges.
Right.
It's how do you get the old guard to embrace change, and how do you get new people to come into your organization and bring change?
Well, and I think that's a great point. And you have now with so many hybrid organizations where people are working from home, and sometimes you don't even know what someone, because you've not worked next to them. But I feel like one of the things that we have discussed before on this podcast, you get almost a hybrid of a workforce. You get people who have been in the workforce for 40 years, people who are brand new. And we all do have to work together, and you have to take the brain trust and the eagerness of all of that and bring it together, because you're only going to get something good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. We are a fully remote organization,
nice,
fully remote workforce. I believe very strongly that we have the technology and we can seize the moment in our history and make something good out of the pandemic to live our best lives through the organization's missions that we serve.
Yes.
Not 100%, not fully, but I think that we absolutely need to embrace that. But the challenges that are there are, we don't know each other.
Right. Yes, that is.
We don't
that
know
is
what
true.
each other's talents are. We don't know where each other's dreams lie.
Yes.
And we're really struggling with that and making a conscious effort to try and understand each other and understand where people's, I don't know what else to say except that dreams, goals, which is hard to do. It used to be you could sit around the water cooler and say, this part of my job is X. I'd really like to do that job. That sounds interesting for me.
Yes.
And then you'd see movement. But right now, all we have is people meeting to do their jobs together.
Yes.
How do you get that water cooler?
I miss the days of a staff meeting. Even though they're online, I still kind of miss getting there a minute early and picking out my seat and asking someone how their weekend was. I do miss that, even though I enjoy no commute. And there's definitely give and take with that. But yes.
We do things like little activities and those all hand meetings, like 2 truths and a lie.
Yes.
It helps.
It helps.
Give me one personal word and one professional word. Go around.
That one. I'm going to take that, because we have asked all these fun questions like, what is a food you couldn't live without? What's your favorite job and why? And it has made a difference, because that is the water cooler, the personal piece, because the personal will lead to the professional, as it always does. So I think that's true.
And if you as a manager, as a leader, are not putting the effort into that, it's going to show in your workforce.
Yes. I loved this conversation. I
fun.
loved what you have talked about, and I'm going to be thinking about things that are not false. And I feel like that is a very different, it's like you just shined a spotlight on that for me. So we usually do this fun portion to let our audience get to know you, and it's a lightning round style question. So I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. Where did you grow up?
Arizona.
Oh, nice.
And I love the warm.
Yes. What's your Starbucks order?
My Starbucks order is walking right past Starbucks to Dunkin' Donuts.
Yes. If you won the lottery tomorrow, would you still work?
Oh, hell yes.
Okay.
But I would probably give quite a bit of money to CLSI to do all the things that I want to do.
Yes. Great. What's the last show you binged watch?
Mad Men. I binge watch Mad Men.
Good.
I love the costumes.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And the decor of everything. Me too. Food you can't live without.
Donuts.
Okay. Great. And what's your bucket list travel destination?
I want to go to Portugal, but I have to say, in all the world travel I have done, I've traveled all over the world. I have never been to Paris.
Oh, yes, that's a good one. That's a good place to have on your list. This has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know our listeners are really going to enjoy this.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Association 100 podcast, brought to you by the A100 publishing team, powered by Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications. You can subscribe to the Association 100 podcast on Spotify so you'll never miss out, or listen via our website at theassociation100.com. Follow us on Twitter at Association100 for all the latest insights and trends impacting the world of associations. Thanks for tuning in.